I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission on Wednesday, June 7th at 6:30 PM at the Don B. Griffin Room at Town Hall in Harwich. This is, again, a hybrid meeting. People can participate online. Anyone who would like to participate online who has not done so can find instructions for doing so on the agenda on the Town of Harwich webpage. So the first item on the agenda this evening is a conservation restriction for 67.1 acres of land located off Spruce Road. So, who is going to speak on this matter? Michael, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks for including this conservation restriction review and approval on your agenda. Michael Locke, Executive Director of the nonprofit Harwich Conservation Trust, and
Kelly Grant, Land Protection Specialist with the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust.
we work with the Compact of Cape Cod Conservation Trust. It's a regional nonprofit land trust service center to help us with the conservation restriction approval process. This is a key part of the process to bring this conservation restriction to completion. Recall that in May 2022 at town meeting voters gave the authorization to move forward with this conservation restriction to be jointly held between the Conservation Commission and the state's Department of Conservation and Recreation as a way to help fund the acquisition and preservation of this property off of Spruce Road, called the Six Ponds Great Woods Project. Town Council has reviewed, and so it's before you for your review and hopefully approval, and we're here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Amy, do you have comments?
Nothing too much further, the town did vote to authorize to use CPC funds to help purchase this magnificent piece of land that is adjacent to other conservation lands, close to Hawk's Nest. It has a variety of different habitat types, very pristine wetlands. It's in a Zone 2 water recharge area, so that won't be built upon. It's in the Six Ponds Conservation District. It ticks a lot of boxes, and this would, we would assist the Harwich Conservation Trust and the state, and with the monitoring and maintenance of this area. So I would recommend that you approve of holding the restriction. This will also allow the town to pursue $400,000 from the state land grant to be returned to the town.
Thank you. Let's see if there are comments, questions, starting with Wayne.
No comment.
Brad?
No, another great cooperative project from the Conservation Trust. Thank you.
No comments, John.
Stan?
No comments.
Sophia? I have no comments. Can we have a motion?
Yes, I will move that we accept the holding of a conservation restriction on approximately 67.1 acres of land located off Spruce Road.
A second.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much for your
Opposed.
partnership on this project.
Thank you for all your hard work.
It's exciting. Exciting. Should we stay here for the next?
They're here for, if you want,
Okay.
for the next topic, if you want them to ask, or to ask them any
Sure.
questions, but
So the next item on the agenda is a request for a certificate of compliance for 61 Bells Neck Road, DEP SE 32-2377 for the construction of a single-family home. Amy?
work was never completed, and the Harwich Conservation Trust is purchasing the property, so it will remain in its natural state. So I'd recommend issuing a certificate of compliance for work not done and clearing the deed.
Any comments or questions?
No comment.
No comment.
Can we have a motion, please?
Sure. I'll move that we approve a certificate of compliance for work not done at 61 Bells Neck Road, DEP SE 32-2377.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed, 6-0.
Thank you
you
all
very
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next agenda item is a request for an extension to an order of conditions for 4 Quasin Lane, DEP SE 32-2367 for demolition of home and construction of a new home and pool. Do we have someone here to speak to this?
I can speak to it, and I think the representative Suaviosev is also online, but if you want, I can quickly start.
Yes, I'm online. Yep.
The plantings for the project have not received the 90% required survival rate. They would like they've tried to replant. We had an issue with drought last year. And then they would like another year to be able to replant to try again. Happy to meet with Shannon Goheen or Suave on the site to look at types of plants to see if it makes sense to make any substitutions if there's something that's giving you a particular problem. So the irrigation ban also made it hard last year with the drought. And just so you guys do know, the irrigation ban didn't cover properties that are conservation that had mandatory planting requirements as mitigation. So the contractors are allowed and the homeowners are allowed to have, we're allowed by the water department to have that temporary drip irrigation when conservation conditioned that plantings needed to be done. So I would recommend a 1-year extension. And Suave, if you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you're spot on. We actually have already placed all, hold on one second. I can hear myself double. So it's very hard for me to concentrate when I hear my voice on the other side. But Amy, you basically did a great job. You described the work that we're going to be doing. Most of the plants have been already ordered. And probably in the next couple of weeks, we're going to make an attempt. But also, I know that we're going to be meeting with you on the job site to see what you advise us to basically a couple other areas that we have questions.
Yep.
Especially along the house foundation, like not on the water side. I think we're doing pretty well there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Comments and questions? Sophia?
No comments.
Mark?
None.
Stan?
No comment.
No
Jim?
comment.
Brad?
Agree with Amy's recommendation.
Wayne?
No. No comment.
I have nothing.
Okay. I will make a motion that we extend for the period of 1 year the order of conditions for 4 Quasin Lane, DEP SE 32-2367.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
6-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next on the agenda is an order of conditions for 18 Bob White Lane, map 17, parcel G4, raise and replace a single-family dwelling.
These were in your Dropbox.
Yeah,
If you have any questions, it It was much more straightforward once they took the plunge pool and the fire pit off, and they didn't increase any of their hardscape in the 50s, so pretty straightforward orders after that.
Questions and comments? Anybody need time to review?
I have no comments on,
No comment.
No comment.
Comments?
No comment.
No.
Okay.
Okay, I will move that we Did somebody have?
Your chair.
It's Brad's
Sorry
chair.
about that.
No problem, your chair is squeaking.
Oh, okay. I will move that we approve the order of conditions for 18 Bob White Lane, map 17, parcel G4.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? All right, so next is discussion and possible vote on a proposed change to the conservation restriction for 25 Bonnie Lane.
If you're online, sorry, if you're online, can you please mute yourself until you want to speak? Thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
Right, so
Jack.
just to comment, there is currently no conservation restriction in effect, is that
Correct.
correct? It's a draft conservation
Correct.
restriction. It's really, isn't it really a request for a change in
The parameters of it.
the parameters specified in the order of conditions?
The order, yes, because the order specified the area, and I know that you need to abstain, recuse yourself.
Okay. Noted.
So yes, if you want really quick, I could just give a brief overview and hand it over. Does that sound okay? So the DeStasio and Carpenito families, through their attorney Bill Cole, have requested to talk to the Conservation Commission in regards to augmenting the parameters of the draft conservation restriction. The conservation restriction was for 25 Bonnie Lane, and it was part of a construction project. And the conservation restriction was essentially mitigation for the work that occurred within the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction. Upon completion of the construction, or completion or start of construction, the restriction was supposed to be in place. That has not been finalized yet, and the construction is done. But they would like to, the restriction is on 15, 19, and parts of 25 Bonnie Lane. And they would like to, for the reasons that I will let them describe to you, change the area and essentially carve out a portion, a small portion of what was to be restricted area.
So, just one clarifying point. The order of conditions states before construction starts, the conservation restriction was to be in place.
Let me just double check that. An agreement to this effect shall be signed by the owner and Conservation Commission
Right.
prior to start of construction.
Okay?
Good evening. Attorney William Kroll from Harwich Port, and I'm basically representing both families in this matter. Mr. DeStasio is seated with me to my right. Mrs. Carpenito, who's one of the abutters, is seated in the rear, and her husband, James Carpenito. Hi, James.
Frank.
I'm sorry, Frank. Sorry. Is here remotely. So first of all, apologies for, on behalf of both families, for not having this conservation restriction in place prior to the construction. I'm going to blame some of it on COVID, because back in 2020, the conservation agent, Amy, and I were exchanging emails, drafts, revisions of the proposed conservation restriction, and that's right around when COVID hit, April of 2020, and that it didn't go any further at that point. The ball was dropped. So we're in front of you now to see if we can amend that to a certain extent, as I'll explain in a minute, and perhaps amend the orders of conditions that are in place, because the orders of conditions state that there shall be no walking path on the Distasio properties. Now, do you folks all have this, a copy of the letter that was submitted by Mr. Caponito? I think that's excellent. It's very thorough in explaining what the sense of the project is, and he attached a copy of the land court plan of his property and sketched in the parcel that hopefully the Distasios will convey to the Carpenitos to square off their lot. And then the walking easement, even though it's sketched in as right along the boundary, the Distasios don't want it right on the boundary out of respect for the neighbors, if this board sees fit to approve the walking path. I have handouts, if you'd like. I have a copy of the Distasios' 3 lots, the plan for their 3 lots. Do
They have that.
They have that, thank
Yep.
you. I also have a copy of the assessor's map that would show how all this ties in, if that's all right to hand out.
Sure, I did I did a similar thing to you, so I didn't do the assessor's map, but I took the Mass GIS to kind of show in relation where everything was, where the Distasios, the Carpenitos, and then 3 properties are. So it's very similar to all that.
And did you show the goal of the schoolhouse ice
did
cream
not.
shop at the?
I did not. We tried to give them a lay of the land.
The Distasios own the 3 lots that have the yellow mark on them. And then I just showed it.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chase.
For the file, why not?
One. So it's just to give some perspective. I've done a lot of work down in the Bonnie Lane area, and these 3 lots, I represented the folks that sold the lots, the 3 lots to the Distasios. And I represented the Carpenitos 25 years ago now when they bought the lot on Neal Road. Sure.
Thank you.
So I didn't put it right on the boundary.
Yep.
Per your request. So hopefully you folks will see this as a passive enough use as far as a walkway is concerned. The last exchange that Amy and I had was over language in the proposed conservation restriction about there was language in there about fences, gates, bridges, et cetera, and she wanted to remove that language, and my response was, how do we do that? How do we have walking trails without without some kind of structure such as fences or gates? But we don't have to. We don't have to. This is a very informal walking path for the grandchildren, for the DeStasios, to get out to Neil Road, over the Carpenitos property, and not a formal path as such. It all depends on how you want to characterize it. They say in the in the language that the Carpenitos drafted that they're looking at wood chips or something along those lines because of the significant amount of poison ivy that exists there. They're looking for environmentally friendly wood chips or comparable surface for that reason, and so that there is a path that the people and the grandchildren can follow to get out to Neil Road.
If I can I
Go ahead.
Can I just say something? We live at 56 Spinnaker Lane, which is just south of these 3 parcels, and we've been there for 25 years. And my wife and I have 6 children, and we're expecting our 8th grandchild. And we wanted to acquire the parcel that abuts our property, so that we could put a little a garage with a couple of rooms over it, because the family's getting bigger. And the people that owned those 3 parcels would only sell all 3 parcels. So we decided to buy those 3 parcels, but we put as I said, we put a garage with 2 bedrooms on top of it, and then we use it for recreation. We have a wiffle ball field, we have a volleyball court, we have horseshoe pits, we have a playground for the little ones. And we've been, the kids have been walking to the ice cream store by going on 28, where there's no sidewalk or anything, and it's, at nighttime after dinner, if they go to the ice cream store, it gets a little dangerous on that. So we were hoping that perhaps, we could build a little walking path that takes us to Neil Road, so that we wouldn't have to go on 28. And we thought about it, but we didn't own all the property that goes out to 28, and it just so happens that Mr. Carpenito had contacted me and said that he'd be interested in acquiring some of the property that abuts his at the, if you can see it, it's the largest piece of the 3 lots. It's the largest one. It's we built ours on 25 Bonnie Lane. We built the guest house for the kids on 25 Bonnie Lane, and it's the property that's on 15 Bonnie Lane, which is the furthest one north toward the ice cream store. Mr. Carpenito just wanted to square off his lot, and so he contacted me about acquiring a small parcel of property so he could do so. And I said, well, I'd love to be able to walk to the ice cream store, and is there any, I'd be willing to swap whatever you want for a little walking path across your property. And so he said, yeah, I think we could work that out. So what we wanted to do is just put a little path through the unimproved woods, so to speak, put some wood chips down, because there's so much poison ivy down there, and just to let the kids walk at nighttime to get ice cream and come back that way. So.
One other comment, if I may, thank you, Jim, is that this is a 2-way street. The Carpenitos, it's very important to the Carpenitos that they acquire that parcel, because as it was explained in their narrative, they want to square off the back of their house. They want to retire here, and they need more of a backyard behind the house, would like to have more of a backyard behind the house. And so they're looking to have that parcel excluded from the conservation restriction, and have the restriction amended to allow for the walking path, and the orders of conditions amended to allow for the walking path. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have comments?
Sure. I did speak at at fair length with everybody before the meeting, and they ran things by me, and I think I gave them my review of things. This project, well, give the commission just a little bit more background. Back in around 2018, they received the permit for the garage with the living space above, for the volleyball court and basically yard area. The order of conditions had basically said that anything outside of the limit of work was to become under a conservation restriction. We kind of have like 2 or 3 wetlands that are sprinkled around this area. And they were able to get, after a couple of hearings, I believe, it was a few hearings, get permission to build what they had wanted there with the condition of putting the conservation restriction on these properties. It's quite especially in this area of town, it's a pretty decently sized chunk of land that does provide pretty good habitat for things. So, my discussion with them was that, the main reason that the Conservation Commission approved this project was to have that conservation restriction on. And the commission, while they wouldn't prohibit people walking on their properties for passive recreation, the creation of a formalized trail, even though I understand your desire, that you want to keep it natural with wood chips, that's something where we would have to talk about, is to create a formalized trail there. It's not something we normally see. And then the, carving out of approximately 1/3 of an acre in order to give it to a neighbor to potentially use it for yard area or development, that's something different entirely. So, I unfortunately cannot recommend that we, based on practice, you don't see, agreeing to a conservation restriction and then carving it out. This was never recorded and never finished. So, I can't make a positive recommendation to you, but I will honor whatever decision you make.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Wayne?
I don't really have a problem with this. I think it would be acting reasonably if we allowed these folks to do something like this. I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
I guess
Ed?
my first question is on the process where this was not filed. Is there any consequence to that? Is that inappropriate that it was not filed? As a
There
conservation-
was back and forth between the attorney and myself, and in the end, it didn't come to fruition. So, I mean, it does not follow the order of conditions.
Right.
If I may, Chair?
Maybe can please allow
Sure.
the commissioners to make comments, and then you'll have a chance for
Sure.
further discussion.
problem.
All right, we can come back to that. I don't mind if they respond now, but it's up to you.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the DeStasios were not opposed to finalizing the restriction. It just, the ball got dropped. So it was not intentional on their part to bypass this commission. That was all.
Yeah, if I can say, I don't think we've done anything that would have violated had it been in place.
Right.
We went out to the site today, and I'd been out to the site previously, and just to make sure that the limit of work was the edge of conservation restriction. And you haven't done anything other than I could tell, where you have the gate in the back that on occasion people might walk back there, but it's not a formalized path or anything. There are some, after we finish this discussion, I want to chat with you about a couple of the orders of conditions that you have on the property that might be questionable about whether they're finished or being followed, but that's a separate discussion we can have after this.
And the gate was primarily when balls go into the woods, the kids, rather than hopping over the fence, go through and go
Gotcha.
get the ball. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Brad?
So let's see, so the idea of having a path through the woods to have kids go to ice cream shop, I don't really have a problem with that, but it should almost just happen. It shouldn't be a cut path, it shouldn't be a mulch path. And I'm concerned about the potential to have future development if we change this from a conservation restriction. So I share Amy's concerns about that. So I wish there was a way just to, have a path provided. Kids use paths all over town. It's always the way it's gone. Let there be a path that they just, walk to. Bringing machinery in, putting down mulch, I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about future practices. So at this point, I want to hear more, but I don't think I support changing it. I was part of the original notice of intent review. It was very much a back and forth process. There were a lot of things that were not supported with the original proposal, and this was a negotiated process that ended up with, I think, a really appropriate conservation restriction. So the last point I'll make, I've been there a few times. I'm concerned about the special condition on fertilizers, and the lawn seems to me to be very much an enhanced lawn in close proximity to a wetland. So I am concerned about that, whether or not it's a separate issue.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, I wasn't involved in the original hearing where the conservation restriction was discussed, but I think I would defer to Amy's position and go along with her comments and take the same position that Amy would take.
Thank you. Stan?
Couple things. I hear the excuse that the ball was dropped, but I'm sure that everything you needed to get done to construct that building was done properly, so I don't see that as an excuse that the ball was dropped. You didn't drop the ball on making building built. So I don't take that as an excuse, as a good response. As far as the restriction, to me, once it was agreed to, that's something you do in perpetuity. You don't go back and amend it and all of a sudden change and carve out another piece of property, which we're talking about doing that here as well. So I'm not for this at all.
Thank you, Stan. Sophia?
I think it's reasonable, the path, except sort of along the lines that Brad said. I think a 6-foot wide wood chip path sounds like a bit much, like maybe that's not necessary. That's my only comment on that. And then the property, it's, just to clarify, it's outside of the 100-foot buffer, but was part of the conservation restriction. I think the path is okay if it's not a big to-do. I'm not really sure on the restriction. No comment on that.
Okay.
Could I just?
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, I didn't really talk about the path. We're talking a big part of it. To get that path, we're talking about carving out a piece of land that was within the restricted area and giving it away. So that's the problem I'm having on that, not the path as much. So
All
thank
set?
you.
So I guess I have a few comments to start with. I agree with a lot of what's been said here. Just to put a finer point on the issue of whether the ball was dropped, if you look at Google Earth, great resource for us, you can see that the lot was cleared as of November 2018, so shortly after the permit was granted, I take it. And by the way, I joined the Conservation Commission sometime in 2018. I don't remember whether I don't think I was part of this because I don't recall it, but I was just coming up to speed at the time, so I'm not sure I was part of the original consideration and debate. It's very clear that construction started in 2018, not 2020, and so COVID has nothing to do with this issue. So the conservation restriction should have been agreed upon and dealt with in 2018, not waiting for 2023. That's one thing. And then, as Amy said, but said she would defer until later, and Brad brought up, not only is it pretty clear that the lawn is treated because there's no weeds, it's a monoculture, it's probably been fertilized, it's had herbicides, or there would be other plants growing there, and there's irrigation. All those things were prohibited in the order of conditions. So I'm concerned about that. This lot was carved out of very nice, pristine habitat. And apparently there was a negotiation coming to this. So I also am concerned and not in favor of carving out 1/3 of an acre out of this agreement and giving it to another lot so someone can have extra backyard. I understand why you guys want that, but I don't think it's appropriate in this case. I would not be in favor of that. I think that the conservation restriction, as specified in the original order of conditions, should be executed and executed now. And that I would not be in favor of granting a certificate of compliance without that happening. That's what I have to say. And as far as the path go, I think I agree with Brad and Sophia.
As far as the path goes, I disagree with that. I think we should allow them to put wood chips. That work could be done by hand. He mentioned that they have young children and there's poison ivy in there. What are you gonna do, have little kids walking down the path of poison ivy all over their legs? Let them put some wood chips in there, for God's sakes.
Okay, but aren't the two issues connected? Because the path would have to go over the abutting owner's property. And the quid pro quo for that would be the conveyance of the property.
Right, I was only speaking to the path.
Okay, but the two can't be separated, because one is a condition of the other. That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The parties would have to discuss that. It's not necessarily 100% tied in like that. I'm sure that the DeStasios would like to have a path regardless.
Am I able to chime in at this point, or do I need to wait a little bit?
You can, if we don't have any further comments here from the commissioners, you may, yes, you may.
We would just
May talk.
announce who you are.
Yes, give your
I'm
name,
sorry.
please.
Frank Carpenito. I'm one of the residents of 85 Hill, along with my wife, Karen, who's in the audience. First off, thank you for putting us on the agenda today. I just wanted to clarify one thing and ask kind of a broad question to the commission. As a point of clarification, I think Bill made the reference to development. We really have no plans to develop the property that we're taking from the DeStasios. The only potential that we would ever go back to the commission and the town, and Amy and anybody else that walked the property today would have probably seen, we've got 2 stakes on the side of our property. And what those stakes represent is if we added a second car garage, and we've not had this formally drawn up yet, so it's my amateur work, as was the sketch we submitted. But there's the possibility, and I wouldn't know until we finished all the lot line work, that if we did add a second car garage, there might be a 1 or 2 or 3 foot encroachment on that 1/3 of an acre that we'd be acquiring from the DeStasios. Now, as I said, we've not had any kind of formal plans drawn up. We're trying to go through this process in steps. That's the extent of any development that we would be proposing that would infringe upon this newly acquired property. Anything else we do was going to be, really upgrading our house, which frankly hasn't been upgraded in probably 60 years. The second piece to my question is, if the 1/3 parcel that we are interested in swapping with the DeStazios is sitting under our ownership versus DeStazios' ownership, and we are abiding to the conditions that the DeStazios are abiding to on the rest of their property, wouldn't that be immaterial? Wouldn't that really be not something that the Conservation Committee would have to worry about, because the protections that you all approve and or agree to would still apply to us? And if we were to ever want to do anything in the future, we'd still have to go through a normal process. But really, for us, the only development piece would be like a 1 to 3 foot encroachment, we believe, at this point. If we ever go that far along with our development, we mainly just want a little bit of land behind us, because we have a very tiny 1/3 acre. And frankly, my hammock, I think, is sitting on the DeStazios' property today. So just point of clarification on the development, and then really just a question for the commission relative to, would it really matter if we had that ownership and still abided with all the conditions? And I'll go back on. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy?
So that last option, we were not made aware of prior to this meeting, so that's a new concept for us. I would think as long as the area that we agreed upon to be under the restriction was still under restriction, regardless of it's the DeStazios or the Carpenitos, as long as the area is the same, I wouldn't see any issue with that from that perspective.
I'm not a lawyer, but wouldn't they have to do their own restriction at that point?
Or they'd have to be party to it. We'll have to work that out, how the legal end works, but yes, either they have a restriction or they become a named party on the restriction. You would probably know better.
Well, it would, in my opinion, it would be, if the DeStazios recorded the restriction now,
Yep,
it would encumber that whole area.
understood.
And then, with the board's permission, the DeStazios convey 1/3 acre
Yep,
to the Carpenitos, subject to that already in place restriction. I don't think you have to do a new one.
I would agree with that, because the restriction, once it's recorded, will run with the land.
Right.
And therefore, if there was a conveyance of the land, the restriction would still be in place, because whoever bought the property would be buying it with that restriction on it in perpetuity.
Right. Yes.
So I have a comment or a question. One is, there's a question for the DeStazios, no, the Carpenitos, I'm sorry. Have you read the draft conservation restriction? Because Mr. Carpenito just referred to, if we want to do anything further, we'll come back later. But my point, and Mrs. Carpenito said she wants a backyard. But those are both somewhat in contradiction to what we just discussed, which is there is a conservation restriction which would not allow any development, would not allow any removal of vegetation, would require things to remain pretty much exactly as they are. And my one question is, if you want to build a garage right up to that line, you're going to have to intrude on that line in order to build the garage. So it's not 100% clean, as far as I'm concerned. But where I go with this is, okay, if that's where we're going to go, you guys have to record the conservation restriction and then come back and ask to do these further things. I don't know what other people think about that, but in my view, that's the first order of business here. Because without that being in place, I don't know what we can agree to here. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Trying to take advantage of the situation as it exists. The conservation restriction has not been recorded yet, has not been executed, has not been formally agreed to by both parties, this board and the DeStazios. So it allows us the opportunity to, without having to amend it subsequently, it allows us the opportunity, if the board sees fit, to amend it now before it gets formalized and recorded. So if the board was willing to allow this slim portion of the 1/3 acre to have a garage on it, it allows us that opportunity without having to amend it subsequently. Just a thought.
Hang on a minute. I'm sorry. What you just said was different from what I've been hearing up until now. You said the 1/3 acre, I assume you're referring to the land that would be transferred
Correct.
to the Carpenitos that could have a garage on it. That's not what I heard before, which is the garage would be built up to the line of that 1/3 acre.
What-
So which one is it?
What Mr. Carpenito was saying, go ahead.
That would be built to the side of the one that currently exists.
You'd have to speak, I'm sorry, you have to speak at the mic.
Yeah,
You
you
have
have
to,
to
I'm sorry.
state your name and
Hi, Karen Carpenito. The garage would be built to the right of the one that currently exists, and the majority of it would be on our current piece of property. It would be a very small area that the garage would probably go over onto. It wouldn't really encroach all that much.
Yeah, and they haven't done a site plan yet because they didn't want to go through that yet.
We didn't want to have to pay for the site plan, which is pretty significant in cost, if we knew up front that we weren't going to be able to go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Yes, sir.
I'd like to ask Amy a question. Amy, has the order of conditions on this been recorded?
The order of conditions has been recorded, yes.
Okay, so therefore, the order of conditions is recorded, therefore you are required to record the conservation restriction. Because
Yes, yes.
You have a recorded order of conditions that binds that property to recording the conservation restriction. So as the chairman has said, I think that has to be done before we could go any further with this.
And I'm not saying that they wouldn't record a restriction, a CR. I'm suggesting that that could be tweaked a little bit to allow for a de minimis encroachment by a garage over the line, as Mr. Carpenito explained, 2 to 3 feet.
And I
Yes,
think-
sir.
And I think the point you made, John, we're not talking just the one that's 2 or 3 feet, and then you have your work in the area around the garage. So you'd really need a plan as to what is going on here.
The limit of work is going to extend further in.
Understood, yes.
And so,
So.
Hay
so-
bales, all of that, yes.
So I think what some members of the board are saying here, and what I would say, is that in order to consider that, we would need a plan.
And that's why we're before you tonight as a preliminary discussion, before the DeStasios spend a lot of money on having the plan finalized. Tom Stello has drawn up a concept, but we wanted to get input from you folks first before that plan would be finalized.
Okay, so you're not requesting the change tonight, then?
I wanted to have a conversation tonight to get
Okay,
a
but that's-
temperature from the board.
But that's different, and I'm fine with that, but that's different than requesting the change tonight.
so I'd like to try to boil this down to maybe 2 things you're actually asking for this evening. You want you want a modified conservation restriction, and you want 2 changes to the conservation restriction. One is to allow for a path, and in your documentation somewhere, it says 6-foot wide path with some surface that will suppress vegetation, specifically poison ivy, and you want some allowance for some incursion into the northwest corner, the northernmost lot of the DeStasios, that would be transferred to the Carpenitos, and you want us to allow for some wiggle room for building a garage that would have a corner sticking into that. So those are the two things. Do we want to talk about those specific things and let people discuss whether they can agree to either one of them? And not get distracted by other things. Let's start with the path. And I'll start with Wayne.
I've already spoken on the path. I
Okay.
agree with the path, totally.
Any-
6 feet wide with wood chips or whatever, keep the poison ivy down.
I'll touch on the path briefly. But really, it's the collective request that I'm concerned about. This was a detailed negotiation for a conservation restriction. These are not in line with the intention of that process in my mind. So the path is the least concern. If it was a mowed 4-foot path for kids to walk on, no materials put down, I might support it. The garage, much more concerning. You're gonna have a garage that goes over the line into an area that was meant to be protected, and you're gonna have human activity on the other side of the garage, no matter what you try to do. It's not gonna be a couple feet, it's gonna go beyond that. There will be human encroachment over time on the other side of that garage. So very concerned about the garage, and then finally, very concerned about the fact that at least 2 special conditions were not met with the order of condition.
Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still a little bit confused and still viewing this as a combined request as opposed to 2 separate requests. And on both issues, in what I view as a combined request, I would like to see a detailed plan showing exactly where everything goes, exactly what type of materials are going to be used, exactly what the dimensions are, before I could even consider any type of revision.
Understood, and that was our line of thinking.
Okay,
That
but
this would be
wasn't what was presented to us tonight.
Well,
I'd just like to.
Can I? Oh, I'm
Hang on a
sorry.
minute, please. I would like
go ahead.
to
Thank you.
let people express, the commissioners, Stan and Sophia, express their reaction to the question I just asked, whatever that is, and then you can go on, and Mr. Carpenito can speak as well, but let's just keep it one at a time here, so go ahead, Stan.
I agree with Brad as far as the path. I don't think there should be any wood chips or anything. It was a conservation restriction. Nothing was supposed to be done in that area to begin with. So all of a sudden to be putting in a path with wood chips and everything, that is contrary to the restriction itself. As opposed to the garage, I already mentioned my comment. To me, I'm against that completely.
Okay, Sophia.
I guess I just feel like maybe I need to see more, need more information. I think it's a good point that you're not gonna just have garage and then, native pristine habitat. But that being said, it's outside of the 100 foot, so maybe there could be some sort of I don't know, conditions put on the garage, but I don't know. I think it's a little bit sticky. I see your point that wood chips, for me, it's like the 6 feet plus wood chips. It feels like a big impact on what seems to be like a really heavily populated area where, there's not that much space for the critters to live back there. So I part of me just sort of feels bad for them. And the more that we build stuff and make paths and stuff like that, the less room they have to do their thing. So I don't know. I think I would like to see more before I say anyway.
Mr. Kroll.
I think Mr. Carpenito wanted to speak,
Okay.
if I may.
Mr. Carpenito.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide a couple points of clarity. So we were really looking at three steps in terms of this moving forward. One is this evening, and as Attorney Kroll said, to really get sort of a preliminary indication. The second step was that we would have Tom Stello execute the property line work. And that would really be drawing the exact lines of our property today and the DeSazios where we abut, and helping sketching out this third of an acre, and this is only estimated at this point. So that was sort of our immediate plan. The reference to us reworking the house and potentially adding a second car garage, really for us is probably somewhere between 2 and 4 years away. We haven't even begun the process of looking at that. We only brought it up at this point, and it's very possible that adding the second car garage would actually not even infringe. But when I put the stakes out there and where I'm guessing where the DeSazio's line is based on prior work that was done, is where I felt this 2 to 3 foot, infringement. I don't have the expertise that each of you does, but I suspect when you look at the proximity of what we're talking about, should we ever get to that point with this 2 to 3 foot infringement, it's at all the furthermost points of the wetlands, and I suspect that something can be done to minimize any disruption on that part of the house, but I know that would be for the future. I guess the question I do have, and I'm not an attorney by any means, my understanding from this discussion this evening is that there was an agreement to put together the restriction, but that the language of the restriction had never been finalized. Is that accurate, or am I misunderstanding it? Was it just never signed?
That, if I may, in my view, the language was not finalized. That's where Amy and I stopped communicating in spring of 2020. So it was not 100% agreed to, all the language of the CR, and therefore was not executed. No.
So if that's the case, wouldn't that mean by the order of conditions then that yes, there was agreement for restrictions, but there was no definition on those restrictions? So creating the definition isn't still a task that needs to be done. And that's where you're suggesting, Bill, I think, that make the adjustments. Let's not even make the adjustments, because there's not a base plate that exists today. It would be creating restrictions that everybody can live with. Since none of them really exist today, it's just a concept today. Is that correct?
So the order of conditions does go into some detail about what should be in the restriction, what has to be in the restriction, not should be in the restriction. And it reads, the owner shall place a conservation restriction on all 3 lots, 15, 19, and 25, with the limit of work being the boundary between usable area and restricted area. The conservation restriction shall allow walking on the property, but no vegetation removal, construction, or formal pathways for an area within the conservation restriction. All area beyond the limit of work on the approved plan shall be included in the conservation restriction. An agreement to this effect shall be signed by the owner and the Conservation Commission prior to the start of construction. So it's in the order of conditions, which is on the permit of the property.
Here's my question, what was the big deal to try and come up with the proper wording on this restriction?
There's a lot.
It should have been done a long time ago.
There's a lot more involved than just, that type of statement, but.
So I'm gonna go back to my original statement, which is, I believe the first thing that has to happen here is that the conservation restriction has to be finalized and recorded. And that's why I went around, wanted to talk about the specific points that you are requesting would be different than what was specified in the original registered order of conditions on the property. You're asking for something different. And so the question for us if we're gonna do anything tonight, we're gonna tell you yes or no about those things. And if we don't do that, I don't think we can do anything here. You guys have to come into compliance, and you're out of compliance in more than one way with the original order of conditions. That has to happen before anything else. And property can't be transferred without you being in compliance with the original order of conditions. And you want to transfer property, but you're not in compliance with the original order of conditions. You don't have a certificate of compliance, and we can't issue one until you're in compliance with the original order of conditions.
So I hear the chair's message loud and clear. Again, the purpose tonight was to get the temperature of the board, to have this discussion, not necessarily looking for a vote. I think that given the board's reaction and wanting to see plans, wanting some more specifics, that I think it makes sense for us to ask to continue the hearing, to give us time to, the two families and myself to confer, to see what they would like to do in going forward, if they choose to go forward or not. Certainly, again, I hear you loud and clear, you want an executed CR, but I would respectfully request that the board give us time to confer and discuss how we want to move forward with this.
That's fine. And this
It
is
wasn't
not
a hearing, it was.
And that's the way I understood it, but Mr. Atkinson was saying that this was a request to modify, so it wasn't a formal request. It was an informal request as a preliminary, to see, get a sense of the board of what your response to this would be. So we know what the response is.
Okay, yes, Brad.
I just feel a little obligation, just to be frank, just to, let you folks know how I feel as someone who was there with the last hearing. I think there may be an avenue to find a pathway solution here. I do feel strongly that any encroachment for structure is gonna be very difficult for me to support, even if it's a couple feet. I just think that really is in defiance of the intention of the conservation restrictions. So I just wanna give you that.
And I heard that, again, loud and clear. We need to get back to Mr. Stello and see, okay, could this garage be entirely on the existing Carpenito lot without asking to encroach on the portion restricted, that will be restricted? That's what we need to discuss and we need to formalize and come back to you.
I know none of you have seen the property, but the piece of property that the garage would go on is already cleared. There is no vegetation there, there are no animals living there. It's more like a side yard, even though some of it may technically be on the DeStasios property, but there is no vegetation and no animals living in the place where this building would go, just so you're clear.
Thank you. We did go by today.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I just make one point? So a lot of times when people ask to make paths, right, we typically allow, like if you have a waterfront property, we would typically with permit allow a 3 to 4 foot wide path to access something. So, I mean, I know this is different because it's a conservation restriction, but a lot of times we don't allow wood chips or stone or anything like that. But if you have poison ivy, something to consider is, I mean, there are landscaping companies that could selectively hand remove the stuff, not with chemicals. You know, those blessed people who don't get poison ivy and who have to wear but wear the long gloves. So, you know, it could be an annual thing. If we get to that point, instead of putting down chips or materials, because I was hearing, you know, and I agree, you know, reluctance with that, because it does say no formal path. But if you were to, you know, hand remove, have that poison ivy hand removed, that's a little less invasive, I would say, than creation of a formalized path.
That was some of the back and forth that you and I were having at the
Yes.
end, was that we wanted to put in language about removing invasive plants, and you wanted language that only with the permission of the Conservation Commission. So we were in that mode, having that discussion, yes.
Yep.
It's a lot of poison ivy, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I am just trying to find a way here.
Okay.
So anything more, any further discussion? I don't think
No,
any
I
action.
think we've got,
Yeah.
I've got a sense for what's,
When you're ready, if you want to come back, just let us know and we'll get you on.
Okay.
Dan?
thank you.
Well, my question is, so we're
Thank
not
you.
going forward at all with the conservation restriction is what I'm hearing.
Gotcha.
Well,
Well,
No, no,
Oh,
no.
no?
well,
that's,
so,
They
that's
want the conservation
their-
restriction in
ball
place,
is in
which
their
is
court.
what's required.
No.
they
the
can't,
commission can put a time frame if you saw fit to have that executed.
Okay, so, do we need a motion to continue the hearing?
It's
we
not a
don't
hearing.
know, but if someone wants to make a motion about setting a deadline for completing this process, if not, I think we're done. Sounds like no one's gonna make such a motion, so I think, or,
Well, let me ask Amy a question. What, based on the preliminary work, what would you, can I ask you for a reasonable
time frame?
timeline?
I think most of it's done.
It's a
much.
10-page document.
Well, no, but I'm asking Amy as to her opinion as to how much time I should request.
I think 2 to 3 months is more than enough.
So, July, August, September 1st. I'd like to make a motion that this conservation restriction for, what's the property?
19, 21, and 25 Bonnie Lane.
19, 21, 25 Bonnie Lane, that the conservation restriction be completed by September 1st? Is that a good date?
Sure.
Of 2023.
That's a Friday.
that's a good day.
May I make an amendment to that motion? It basically not only completed but recorded.
Okay. I
Or
accept that.
signed by the Conservation Commission and recorded, yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, signed and recorded.
So, that's a second. You accepted
I
his
accepted
amendment.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in,
What-
yep,
I was just gonna say, I don't have a strong feeling for putting a timetable on this, but if it's suitable, if it's not a consequence for you guys.
To show good faith, I think that I don't have a problem with September 1. I do have a problem with recording it by then, because what if we come in the end of August to see you and you say, yeah, that's okay, fine, we'll sign it. But we'll sign it at our next meeting and it takes us beyond that type of thing. But
What do you think's a good timeframe, or do?
I think, the commission's been flexible as long as you show you're working on it. You know, if you need a few extra days or a week or whatever.
to get it recorded after you sign it,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's just.
I don't have, to show good faith, I don't have a problem with September 1.
Jim?
Well, what I would suggest is if you are concerned about being able to get it, sort of finalized and recorded by September 1, by what date would you be comfortable with having it finalized and recorded?
I'm good with September 1 based upon Amy's comments.
That's not what I asked. I
I'm
asked
good with
what
September
date-
1 for signing and recording.
You are good with
That's what
September
I'm saying.
for signing and recording?
Yes.
Okay.
If we need extra time, we'll be back in and say it's been signed, we need another week to get it recorded. We can e-record, electronically record these days, so it's not a big deal.
Right.
Okay,
Just for clarity, I wouldn't be able to have Tom Stello's work done probably in that window, but that may not matter.
Correct,
He's,
Yeah,
I'd
it's
have to
separate.
talk to him.
correct.
Yep.
It would not matter.
Separate.
So thank you for all of your time and
okay,
consideration
we
tonight.
have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion on this motion from the commissioners? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time
Thank you.
and your comment.
Thank you.
What are we doing? on in. Mr. Chair, I'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay, we'll take a few minutes to take a few deep breaths.
Chairs out there. There were chairs out there. No. Oh.
So- Excuse me. So the next item on the agenda is discussion and possible vote on the Bell's Neck Land Management Plan amendments. So how do we want to proceed here? There's a lot of changes in Brad, the most recent draft that you posted. I was going through, I didn't get all the way through the thing, but I had some further, mostly very small things, but we have not gone through this version at a previous meeting. Is that correct?
I can't remember. It's been a while that we've had this.
It's been a while.
I have some substantive comments.
It was put before the commission in February at a hearing.
Right,
Yeah.
but then a lot changed since then.
Well,
right?
no,
No,
it
this
hasn't.
is, no.
I think people didn't have enough time for that hearing to really dig
We
into
were
it.
really crazy busy that time of year with hearings, so.
Right, but it is an advanced draft, it's gone before the commission several times. For me, I'm kind of waiting to respond to others' comments.
I see.
And then I plan to draft, we talked about having an operation and maintenance plan in an appendix on water management, that type of thing. And I pledged at that February meeting to draft that. I was waiting for people's comments on this, but that's probably my next task, is to draft that O&M, which would be like a 1 or 2 pager in the appendix.
I started on that, but I just
Okay.
haven't got it to you.
Okay.
But we can talk about it here since we have time.
So one way to approach this, maybe, I mean, it's my impulse, but it's labor intensive, is to step through the document just from the first page, going through all the comments, and some of them are substantive and would take time to deal with, and some of them aren't. They're just, they're little things. So you want to go that way? Or, I don't know how we're going to get to the end of the process without doing that at
I
some point.
think we need to go step by step. And that way, however much we have time and finish tonight, we finish, and that way we have a place to start the next time. So,
Oh, I agree with that.
that way we, go
I
ahead.
think that's okay. I will express a little frustration that we're not having commissioners step up with comments with multiple opportunities.
Well, we're just gonna have to take what we have and go through these things, and, and if we get to the end of the process, and we've taken all the comments that exist and dealt with them one way or another, then I don't know what else we can do here. And there are probably things in here sections that you know, one person or another has a particular interest in what it says, and a lot of other sections where that's not really the case, and it's just perfecting the prose or something. I mean, it's just simple stuff, turning the crank.
Well, let me
But
ask you this then, there's a fair amount of introduction and kind of background information. And so, whereas I think the meat of it for this commission and its members are the actual management operations.
I agree.
So I wonder if we should, you know, ask for comments on the introduction and the background information, and people can provide those.
Well, there are comments and questions. I mean, I went through this whole document back then. I started to go through it again today, but I have a lot of comments, but the comments are more of them are questions than comments, or just pointing out, this is something that we need to update or do something about. And those things have to be resolved at some point. So, I mean, we could choose to skip tonight to a few specific issues. I'm more inclined to just, you know, get down, I mean, part of the reason we haven't finished this is, I mean, from my point of view, it's avoidance. It's like, I don't wanna deal with those nitty-gritty details. It's just a pain in the neck, but I think we have to do it and just get it done. And get down to a few issues which maybe require a more involved conversation.
Well, how about if we start right from the beginning?
Yeah, let's do that.
Focus on every comment and question, and then go from there. And see how far we get tonight.
I think that's what Amy was
Okay.
suggesting, and I agree with that, and, I mean.
Really, so we know where we, where we ended up, so we can start again, you know?
Right. So, why don't we start? The first comment is yours on the item A in the introduction. And it's, again, it's more of a question. Should we add a sentence or two here about acquisition documents?
My comment to that would be that we can put the acquisition documents as an appendix if you wanted to.
So do you want to add a sentence here referring to
Sure.
that? So you're taking a handwritten note about this, and you're going to incorporate that
Yep.
in the document? Okay.
Yeah, I have my draft here, so I'm just make notes as we go.
And that will resolve the second comment, I think, because you're gonna have a reference to the appendix. And I do agree that we should change that wording from the Conservation Commission, acquired by the Conservation Commission, just say acquired by the town of Harwich. And then
Right.
have the details in the appendix.
Strike Conservation Commission.
Yeah.
Uh-huh, okay. Next is your comment. Come here, replaced or put elsewhere, I didn't,
Yeah, that's language from the original plan,
Mm-hmm.
2012, and to me, the for instance, you know, you could put that later when it talks about erosion and trails. I don't know if you need to have a third of that purpose paragraph to be a for instance.
I agree.
so you're suggesting to just strike that?
Well, move it into, I think it's I mean, I don't even know if we need it, because it is addressed in the management goals and the environmental impacts, as well as public access. So, to me, it kind of, I think that it's brought up elsewhere, and I don't know if you need it. I don't know if we need an anecdote there.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. So you're gonna strike that.
I'm gonna strike it.
So what about this item D, add details on Herring River Fishway parking lot?
So we can mention that in 2022, with permission of the Conservation Commission with an RDA, you allowed the parking lot to move back at least a few feet. And we installed that heavy-duty post and rail fence to create a little bit more distance between cars and the herring ladder, and that was revegetated with a native meadow mix. We can add that, that's what we've done, but if we want to do anything further, and we also cut off, you know, like launch access right next to the herring run there too. So we can
Right,
add.
there's some confusing text later on, which I think we'll get to about that, which I didn't fully understand. So this is text you're going to compose and put in there.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good idea to, right up front, to say, hey, here's progress for things that were recommended in the
Yeah.
prior plan, here's what
Uh-huh.
happened. And then there's probably a couple other things people can think about that might fit in there.
We also decrease the size of it in general, so not
Yeah.
just moving back.
The town DNR has been putting out a net outside of the flow path
Yep.
to the bogs to try to minimize fish kills. That to me is a positive, and I could find a date when that began.
Any other ideas about that? Okay. Somebody made about, comment about. Oh. So, next comment here is at the beginning of section 2 about the heading, which is yours.
It's really just kind of bringing this site description up to speed in terms of climate change. So it's kind of boilerplate information about the site, given geography, climate, property type. And so really for me, that's like find a reference or two to include as to what's going on.
Under item C for soils, climate, and hydrology, we could put it in.
Yeah.
So who's gonna do that? You, Amy, or Brad?
Brad, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and, you know, I wouldn't be pulling out a reference to, you know, doomsday climate change, but certainly there's references on warming in Cape Cod region, New England region, both ocean and atmospheric warming.
Salt marsh migration.
Yeah, there's things that are relevant. The tide is coming up more than it did 30 years ago at this location. I may not find a reference for that, but some blanket references that speak to that are probably important.
So, but this text that is here is in fact what was written in 2011.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I
It's
don't
more
think-
historical.
Yeah, nothing was really taken out of that.
Okay,
And maybe there's other items that people want to update, but I didn't see any need to change anything unless there's more recent citations available.
okay. All right, so I made a comment here in C about adding references. And actually, I said for this thing, need to include a reference at the end or attached soil survey information, but then there is a reference here, so I'm not sure what that's about.
We can make sure it's the most up-to-date, because
Okay,
check if most up-to-date info.
okay, so in the last paragraph of that item C, I also commented about a sentence which was just a little unclear. I think it's supposed to mean that eutrophication can also make freshwater toxic to animal and human consumption. It doesn't say that, and it's unclear what that refers to. Whether it's extreme heat or eutrophication, I would
see what
just
you mean, yeah.
replace it with eutrophication.
Is that page 3?
This is item C,
Yeah.
Yeah, page 3.
third paragraph.
Okay.
It's like
Extreme heat can cause increased
fourth
radiation.
sentence or something.
I would just say eutrophication instead of it.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting. And so then I also had a comment under first paragraph in section 3 where it's talking about, what's that?
Go ahead, sorry.
Talking about the survey of flora and fauna, and I was just asking for an additional comment saying it was not considered necessary to update this for the revision. Right?
Sounds good to me.
We did talk in February, I think Sophia was gonna consider what was there for those items, just to think if anything had changed in terms of plants, and I'm sure Amy can do that as well. Does that make sense? They did a full survey, the town paid them to do all that work. I don't really feel it's necessary to repeat that with a contractor,
No.
but I wonder if we have in-house experience that might just say, okay, maybe
It's-
get a sentence saying that the town staff and commission members reviewed it, instead of an update.
Well, if the bald eagle's not in here, it should be.
Right. There's things like that, there's some changes.
Okay. So then, you're going to, Sophia, you're volunteering
I
to
will, yeah.
review this material?
Sorry to
Work
put
on
you
it
spot.
together.
That's okay, I forgot.
We can work on it
Yeah,
together.
well,
But
that's,
I think
that's
the
why we're
Sounds
doing
great.
it.
It's really gonna come down to mostly, I mean, other than that, it's gonna come down to looking at plants, and, they did a pretty comprehensive list, so if we're missing anything, we're not missing much.
Right. Part of that, I pledged to put together a table on fish,
Right.
which isn't really there now, so
Put that in,
I will do that.
fish
That's easy.
table. Okay. All right, so skipping through the flora and fauna inventory then.
Oh, there,
Oh, there's some comments.
there is a comment. Oh, I was pointing out here under the bird thing that link doesn't work anymore. Under the table for the birds, there's a link for the source of that information, and that link no longer works.
Oh,
Which is always a risk when you put a,
yeah, old document.
so that,
So we'll change it to the Audubon's bird sighting, like most recent bird sighting report too.
yeah, I sort of looked there, I didn't know where to look on their site, so.
All right. We can look at that.
Then,
Also exclude a link and just say, here's what the previous, plan had,
Hmm.
so,
okay, well, could do that as well.
yeah. If you don't
Links are
find,
dangerous.
yeah, if you don't
Or
find,
you could just say, for more information about bird sightings, go to the Mass
Mass
Audubon.
Audubon,
yeah.
just, yeah.
And also, under the, one of these flora, the uplands table of plants, there's a comment about, a similar comment about where to look for lists of plants and animals, and I'm just asking for, wait a minute. Oh, it's about a workbook that's created as a working document. I'm asking for status.
We don't have a workbook, we have a pretty comprehensive native plant list though.
You're talking about the one that's on the website, on the conservation webpage?
Yeah, that one needs to get updated too, but we have it on a server.
You mean there's an up-to-date one on the server, but the link on the webpage is to an out-of-date one? Is that what you're
It's
saying?
about a year old, the one that the link is to. We've updated, actually, we've added about 10 plants this year.
Well, can you provide here a reference to that so
Yep,
people can whatever the most appropriate way is. Again, I'm not sure a link is appropriate, particularly when the town is in the process of upgrading and updating its whole IT system. I'm not sure a link you make today is gonna work 6 months from now or a year from now, so.
We can refer them to the website, but not
Yeah,
put the
right.
link.
Okay.
Okay.
Brad, you're asking for an update of Phragmites and salt marsh under 3.2.2 salt marshes?
Yeah, and I think Amy can do that in her sleep, so,
That's me,
yeah.
Okay.
Amy.
Is this? Oh,
And yes, that should be east and not west. The
Okay.
the east reservoir is, salt marsh is.
where are we? I'm
Sorry, I'm on page 10 at the top. Under section 3.2.4, land under salt ponds. And your comment, John, isn't the salt pond east of Bell's Neck Road? And
Oh,
you are
okay.
correct.
All right, I
That's
just,
an easy fix.
something up here. There we go.
And I will update frag status throughout the plan.
Okay.
We can add so your comment, Brad, was FEMA status, and the flood zones did change here from the 2014 update of the FEMA maps.
Yep.
So we can, why don't, as an appendix, we put the FEMA map to this?
So where are you now? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry,
326.
Okay, can we back up for a moment? Because
I'm sorry,
I inserted a couple of things here that aren't on that document. They're little things, but at the end of, right above 3.2.5, I think it's the last sentence. These habitats,
should be R.
yes. And
Yes.
then just some grammar here that, so in 3.2.5, second sentence off in BVWs, there's no apostrophes in plurals, I'm sorry. Anywhere you put an apostrophe in a plural, please take it
Gotcha.
out. There are extra commas in here. BVWs provide, comma, the most important, and the comma needs to go.
That's the old one.
I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Excess punctuation.
And then in 3.2. Oh, you had another comment about updating frag status.
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do frag status throughout the document.
And just another simple grammar thing, 3.2.6, third line, caused by the 100-year storm, comma, surge. Need to take the comma out.
I think there are separate things. The 100-year storm is different than the surge of record or the storm of record.
Oh, wow. The 100-year storm, comma, surge of record, comma,
And
or
it should be
storm
comma
of
after
record.
surge of record. They're three
I
separate
see,
things.
okay, all right, well, that, okay. And then you were on LCSF, the last,
I was gonna put a comment that in appendix, whatever number it turns out to be, is I'll attach the FEMA maps to this, for this
Okay.
area.
and then another thing, I just, second sentence in or second line in 3.2.7, creek, river, steam, pond.
Yeah,
wonder if that carried over from the last one.
Yeah, these,
Must
I
have,
I took it directly from them,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, yeah, I think that we talked about this thing about the vernal pools last time we talked about this, and I don't,
North of Great Western, a BSC has identified a potential vernal pool located north of Great Western Road, northwest of the active cranberry bog, so that's Thatcher's, adjacent to the property. I don't think it has. Active cranberry bog adjacent to the property. Is that the big bog, Thatcher's Big Bogs, or the small bog that's just north of Great Western Road? Which is also Thatcher's, but the small, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
I do, but I don't know of any vernal pool in that area. So I'm
BSC
trying
has
to-
also identified a potential vernal pool north of Great Western
North
Road,
of Great Western.
northwest of the active cranberry bog adjacent to the property. I want to say that that is in Sand Pond Woodlands, but not the little bog, not the little one right on Great Western Road. Is used in the past as a dumping ground and contains a large amount of debris, including scrap metal, car parts, and tires.
Really?
Is that really adjacent, like directly adjacent to the conservation land?
No.
Well, keep in mind that this report included what is now known as Sand Pond Woodlands, but at the time, when this was written, was known as Bell's Neck North.
Oh, wow.
So they incorporated north of Great Western into this document.
Yeah,
Because at the time, it wasn't, it was all considered one
right.
piece.
So maybe you can strike that highlighted section for north of Great Western, because it might not be applicable to.
Still something we should look at,
Okay.
but, yeah.
so,
Technically, it doesn't really belong here
Well,
because it's north of Great Western Road,
if it doesn't belong here, we should wipe it out.
but we should still check on it.
okay.
I think that's a good point.
Yep. Yeah, John's comment, what is the status?
Yeah, right.
Looking at the status
We'll
and,
look into that, but we'll strike it from document.
yep.
Because we have all other, you know, land management stuff from Sand Pond Woodlands.
Additional study should be considered to see if the
So that's-
pools north of Great Western,
We'll strike
is
that
that
too.
referring to the same?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Anything north of Great Western Road shouldn't be in this. It's really a different study area.
Right.
That's a good catch.
Yeah.
Supplemental document containing the endangered species shall be submitted with this report. So,
It I just didn't, we have that document.
and it-
Um,
something from BSC?
because what we didn't want to do is, they gave us a report of the endangered state listed
Oh,
species.
right.
We didn't provide them for the public because we don't want people necessarily going out and looking for or picking them, or, so we had it for our records of the endangered things, but,
You don't want the public doing what?
well, like going out there and trying to disturb these plants or animals, things like that.
Well, it's like the note that people have apparently dug out 10 high tide bushes, right? They're not endangered though, right? But still, people go poaching for things, right?
Yep.
So, but what should be done with this comment now?
Where is that comment?
It's
Sorry.
right before D. It's in 3.2.10.
Okay. Oh, instead of, it says shall be submitted to the Conservation Commission, it has been submitted.
Does it need to be updated?
I haven't touched it, so probably.
Can you add the date? So it's a little more of a citation as to when it came out.
Yeah, it came in right at the time of this report, but as a supplemental document, date the report. Yeah, so it does say identification and locations of endangered species information contained should be kept separate from the general public in order to protect the state listed species. But we need to know that they're there. Date. Okay. And I'm happy to provide it to you guys. But it's not something we're gonna put on the website.
Right.
I have seen people, like, disturb things when you call out that you have something somewhere. Mostly if it's good intentions, but they go disturb things.
It's weird that people regulate it for something they don't know what it is, so I've always thought that was an odd thing, but then I think if you tell people there's a bunch of lady slippers in a property, you might have someone go in there and dig them up. So I think that's.
Dig them up or just inadvertently trample
Yeah.
an area that, if you say, oh, they're in this area,
Yeah.
We had people, when I worked up in Eastham, when I was in natural resources, and we would do salt pond Sundays for shellfish. There was a rare plant in there, and it was made known, and then it got harvested. So,
So then, you have a comment, Brad? You want to update this table of invasive species?
I thought, yeah, have Amy run through it, she knows what's out there, and then I think it would be good to add a column. You could truncate these columns and add a fourth column that says approximately where they're located. That might be a little more information on what's going on. And the ones that are not found, I don't know if you even need those.
Where did this whole list come from?
when they did their inventory, they were out there BSC Group was out there for an entire year. Every few weeks, every season. So they documented all these things.
So they documented everything that wasn't there too?
No, sorry.
Okay.
I don't think I understood your question then.
Well, that was part of my question, but still, why are these things on the list when they weren't found?
I think they're likely to be found there at some point,
I see.
but maybe
Common
that could be
species
separate rather than this.
Found and to look for.
You could have a
I
footnote.
understand.
Yeah,
You could have a footnote saying they were not found in the prior survey, but they're known to be there now, so it might be, a 1 or 2 footnote, And then I don't know how people feel about saying where things are.
I mean, I could create a map for you just for the commission, so you can be aware of where, like, the major infestations are if you want. I'm not gonna get every little area, but
Yeah.
we know the main areas.
That'd be good.
Yeah, I don't think we need to keep the not found things on here. That is kinda strange.
It is.
Yeah, we don't,
Not found and not found.
And the prior report will still be reported on its own. People can use that as a
Yeah.
reference. And so the
but yeah, we
information-
don't have yet Asian longhorn beetle.
Hope not.
So then, there's a final paragraph in that section is about treating invasives. I just asked the question, does this still apply? Is this still the right way to think about that?
Only for frag, I would say, especially in the bogs, near the herring run bogs. I mean, the only way to get rid of frag, unfortunately, like especially because it's starting to get pretty substantial out there, is to have a certified applicator use an approved
But this-
herbicide to take care of it.
This is also going by the size of the colonization and how to treat it. Do you think that still makes sense?
Treatment and directed to small new colonies.
I think my comment was calling for Amy or Melissa at the time to have maybe a full consideration on rewriting this invasive paragraph, just to bring it up to date.
Sure.
What we typically support.
For instance, like the Phragmites that's in the, what's known as the East Reservoir, you're never gonna tackle that, that's just unfortunately
Right.
gone, but what's starting in the bogs can still be tackled.
I don't know if we want to call out specific brands like Rodeo. I mean, the herbicide industry is coming out with new stuff all the time.
I was just gonna say a state listed wetland approved,
Yeah,
or a
I
state
think that's good.
wetland approved, yeah.
Particularly because particular brands, if you go into a hardware store and look at what's in these things, there's 10 different formulations under a single brand name, some of which you probably really don't want used in a place like this.
Well, and we should also say in here that any activity has to be approved by the Conservation Commission. Because you can't, we would require anybody else to do that, is to come in forward and get a permit from you for doing herbicide treatment in a wetland or adjacent to a wetland. So
Right.
I'll say it needs Concom approval. So just because it says here in the plan that we can do it, we can't just go out there and do it tomorrow. You still need to permit it. Okay?
So then when we go to section 4, which is talking about land use, it's still listing a cranberry operation, which is not true anymore, so
Mhm.
that needs to be edited, struck, or whatever.
Mhm.
Did you modify that to say it's not in commercial cranberry operation, but it is for the happy homeowner to go and pick them?
Is operation the appropriate term in that case?
I would use commercial.
Cranberry
That implies that it's
production?
being done productively for money for somebody to do it, whereas the homeowner or whatever,
Right.
you just go pick them for their own benefit.
In commercial production.
Yeah,
recreational use.
yeah, something like that.
Recreational picking. All right.
That next paragraph could be rewritten to account for the work done recently.
I mean, alterations in the parking.
Yeah,
Yeah, I had that down.
Right, right.
one positive recommendation that was realized.
And I
Oh, no,
started
Bill said
updating the
okay.
management goals to say what has already been done.
I mean, the next paragraph there.
Yeah, section 5.
Right. Well, I had a comment on the last paragraph,
Okay.
talking about the parking areas and trails. And I just don't know if that's up to date.
It's not, we can make it up to date. We did replant and rope off sections for regrowth. We haven't reduced width of trails, but, it comes up later in the document about using that heavy-duty fencing instead of those little, instead of the stone piles. So that's gonna be done this summer to block off vehicular use. So when this document was written in 2011, 2012, people could actively drive through a large portion of the Bell's Neck from Bell's Neck Road. So the trails were really wide primarily because of that reason. Now that people can't readily drive through because of either fencing or the stone piles that we put, I mean, you can get a dirt bike or an ATV in there, but you don't have your truck going through. So that has reduced the width of many of those trails because you're no longer having vehicles go through there. So naturally has happened.
Okay.
But just to let you know, we will be this summer taking out those stone piles that are on Bell's Neck Road. Not too sightly either, and starting to really not be that effective. And we're gonna be using that heavy-duty fence that we used at the depot entrance.
Where's this now?
So on Bell's Neck Road itself, if you're coming from Great Western, you pass the reservoir on your right.
Yeah.
On the right, as you go up the hill and before you go down to the bridge, there's several pull-offs where people, you can park there now because there's room for a car. You used to be able to drive straight in to the Bell's Neck, into the conservation area and essentially use a lot of the walking trails as car paths.
Used to be able to drive all the way to the flume.
I know.
When I was a kid, we drove woods cars through there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what we had on hand several years ago was rubble. So that's what we used. Now it's kind of settling. It's not nice to look at either. We're gonna remove that. And that's what was keeping people from driving, and we're gonna use that, 4x6 fencing
I see.
that we've used other places that has been pretty effective. It's much better than just plain split rail, which knocks over. So we're gonna do that this summer with DPW. I just put an order in for more fence,
Good.
so.
Who installs those?
DPW,
Really? Yeah.
yeah, I can do split rail, I'm not gonna do that. They put them in
Oh,
real
that's
good. And what's nice too, if we had a fire there, the only thing that you have to do if they need to get in there is unscrew them.
Yeah.
It comes right out,
Yeah.
but it does the trick. Okay,
No fires.
oh, we've had them.
Yeah, I know. So item 4 on in section 5, under item A, item 4, under A, Roman numeral 4, I called out this sentence, third line, pitch pine bores and installing water bars.
We don't need to do water bars.
What is that?
So a water bar is a way to slow erosion. So if you have a really steep slope, or just to get water off a trail, you install breaks in the trail.
I see.
Could be gravel trench, it could be railroad tie, it could be something else like that, but it slows the speed of water down. I don't think we really need it.
I don't know, I just didn't know what that was.
I think oak logs would be applicable in that application because they're calling for oak mulch anyway, which basically is oak chips.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you used a series of oak logs down through there, that would assist and
Most of,
continue to break down as the chips would.
it's almost more invasive to put them in, because some of these areas are only this wide. And they are steep, but then if you were to put these logs in or something else, I mean, it might actually be an attractive nuisance. People could get down slopes easier.
There is that possibility.
So things are, I've walked in there pretty recently, and things are really kind of growing in. I don't think, I mean, we can keep it in there, but
Yeah, right.
I don't think it's a high priority at this time.
I would agree with that. Maybe it's not a particularly high priority, but if it's in the language, at least the option exists.
Mm-hmm.
Should there be.
We can leave it. Okay.
So then I was asking in item Roman numeral 6 under Herring River whether this sentence, the town of Harwich is now considering opening harvest of river herring in 2023. Does that need to be updated, or is that still the right?
It should be changed because the town chose not to have harvest this
Right.
spring. So we could say they're considering for 2024.
Yeah.
What was the count this year?
It's at 527 right now, and there's still some bluebacks coming in, so probably 530 plus,
530,000?
yeah. So
Still sounds small.
last year was 290.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was bad last,
Doubled almost? Wow.
Well,
I mean,
That's good.
but 3 years ago, it was $1 million.
Yeah, I know.
A
It's not
million's
good.
rare
Oh, yeah, yeah.
in recent years, in recent
Do you
decades.
say this is average, what we're seeing right now?
It's, for the plan that I wrote, the average is about 550, but that's only an 8-year average. Statewide, you don't get very many half-million runs.
I
And
was gonna
so,
say, what are you seeing, what's the trend this year for the state?
better than last year. Last year was a dip almost everywhere,
Mm.
and this year propped up. A couple other half-million fish runs, and general improvements on the Cape, South Shore, North Shore. Buzzards Bay still not great.
Yeah.
Half a million is, it's a lot of fish.
They still pair trawling for them offshore?
They go after sea herring and mackerel, and they catch river herring as
They catch 'em.
bycatch. They're much restricted from what they used to be, but they put in a restriction 20 miles east of the Cape where they couldn't go, and then 12 miles from the Cape down to North Carolina, a judge threw that out.
Oh, really?
That would have been a real valuable tool
Yeah.
to reduce interactions, because river herring close to shore.
Mm-hmm.
A judge threw that ruling out, so
Really?
that's unfortunate.
Where? Is this a federal judge?
Yeah, it was a federal requirement to try to reduce mortality on river herring as bycatch. It was put in as a rule after years of negotiations and discussions, and then it was challenged by the sea herring and mackerel fishery.
Is that a federal judge or?
I don't even know, it was determined to be arbitrary and capricious.
Oh, my.
And, the word is, it's gonna be, that'll be appealed.
Yeah.
But, it's hard to say how long that'll take. It took years to get it in.
Right.
But there's been a lot of processes to reduce the interactions, so there's a lot less ocean bycatch than there used to be.
That's good.
And so that's a good thing,
God,
you know.
that drives me.
We're not gonna get back to
crazy.
what you used to see as a kid.
No, we used to be able to almost walk across that pool.
Yeah, you'd see 1 million fish every year.
Yeah, easily.
But, I think what I'm hoping is the town can find, a way to have a modest harvest that gives people access to fish that they used to have in a much shorter duration.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of pitching some ideas on, a couple-week opening when they're coming up, a couple-week opening when they're going out for bait, and just give people a little chance to take a few and not have a wide-open season
Yeah.
in the past. So, we could make that change pretty quickly by just changing the date, because I think you'll see the Board of Selectmen take up this discussion for next spring. So that, otherwise, that could probably stay. There was some talk on adopting a bylaw to give the Natural Resources Department the ability to issue non-criminal citations. We could leave that, that's actually left over from the previous one. I think that was an issue, I guess DNR doesn't have the ability to do that, but is that really our interest, or it's not a strong concern of this management plan, I don't think.
No, police can.
Police can enforce environmental rules. We could leave that and see where it goes.
So, just another grammar edit here, in that, below where that Town of Harwich is considering sentence, there's a sentence that says, consideration should be given to adopting a town bylaw allowing.
Yep, I got that.
Okay.
Yep.
Next one, depot.
I need to get that Herring River Fishway study to you guys.
So on item 7, the Depot Street Cranberry Bog, the Depot Street Cranberry Bogs are currently flooded with reservoir water. That is incorrect, right?
That's a little bog in back of the clam processing business.
Oh, is that?
If
Is
that's,
that what that's referring to?
if it is.
It talks about the sluice way.
Yeah,
I thought
these
it's
are-
next
these
to
are
the
our
fish
bogs.
ladder. This
Okay.
is the, I don't know why it's,
So we should.
it should say the Bell's Neck Bog, but
Yeah.
they're not being flooded anymore, right?
No, 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 yeah.
So what should that paragraph say exactly? I mean,
Oh, yeah, we don't wanna call it Depot Street, I don't believe.
We'll say
No.
Bell's Neck
Depot
Bogs.
is the one behind the oyster.
Yeah.
Are currently
that's
farmed.
being currently farmed.
But this is about controlling fish going down that sluiceway. So that paragraph is. So,
Maybe you get rid of that whole thing at that location, and it becomes a management item.
More of a water management
Yeah,
level item than a bog.
right, there'll be
Farming
direction
item.
in the water management O&M as to what to do.
you're saying take this item 7 out completely?
Or
and
change
Put the
it.
content somewhere else?
Well, it refers to during 2012, hundreds of fish and frogs in the ditches. That's kind of an old observation.
Right.
So I almost think, so it talks about reclaiming, you know, this document has discussions other places about naturalization. It was discussed back then. It was a recommendation at one point in that 2012 document. But I don't know if you need that paragraph anymore in this location.
All right, I guess you have a comment at the end of all this saying effectively that.
Yeah.
I see Alan's online.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, he has been for a while.
I just haven't looked up. Just trying to listen in. Okay.
All right. So you have a note, are you gonna take care of that paragraph, or?
So,
It even says native cranberry blueberry picking. So your idea came up before?
we can update,
Yeah, apparently,
but we should allude to
nothing happened then like now.
Well,
the water
Working on it,
management
right?
operation.
I hope so, Brad.
We can update, but we can also allude to a water management operation and maintenance plan that we need to do. Because we gotta keep at some point, probably keep some flow, either to control vegetation, but also just so there's not a mosquito issue. That's the big driver. So in conjunction with Cape Cod Mosquito Control, I think we need to have another sit-down with them, or the subcommittee or something needs to have a sit-down with them and figure out what their recommendations are to make sure we don't have a problem,
I think we asked them to review the draft O&M.
you know?
You know, we met with them in March
Right.
2020 on
Yep.
site, and what they want is flowing water.
Yeah,
And we set the
and that's
boards
hard with the fish.
that day to a certain elevation. I think we put language that says, okay, here's the target elevation. And everyone agrees on what the goals are, and my guess is it's to keep water flowing. We want the back former bog to be wet,
Yes.
and so we want to keep that going. We don't want pools for mosquitoes to grow. And so I'll draft that, it'll take what you have and then edit that.
Okay.
And then next time we meet, I think that'll be something to review.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Alan.
Yes, hi. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I'm just listening to the comments and you're talking about the water flow and the elevation of West Reservoir. That bog currently has a water withdrawal permit. It's still active with the DEP. And how would we handle that going forward?
I think we'd have to review the permit, see what.
And the permit is currently active, and it's in Leo Kokunis's name.
What?
Why?
Good question. I have no idea.
Do you have
have
a
it?
copy?
Yeah, I've seen that. I can email it to you. I received it from the DEP.
If you can send it to me,
Because-
Alan, that'd be great.
Yeah, because I got a water withdrawal permit on that same reservoir. And just for note, our property has deeded rights to maintain the level at whatever level we need for our bog, for the water heights in that reservoir,
Yep.
just so that isn't affected.
Water withdrawal permit. If you can send it to me, I'll send it to the group.
Yeah, I'll do that. And then also that bog has cranberry marketing orders for the crop. And how are we handling that? Because the Cranberry Marketing Committee oversees all that for the USDA.
It has what?
A cranberry marketing order, and it's allowed so many barrels,
Quota.
and it's recorded with the United States Department of Agriculture.
Is
And
that a-
same with the Main Street bogs.
So is that an item that has some financial value that you can, is it like a quota you can sell to somebody else?
That's a possibility, and I'd like to investigate that. Never heard of that.
I
know.
admit I don't know anything about that, so.
Why isn't it mute if we're not using it?
I have that information.
Okay.
Alan will figure it out.
Alan,
But
Alan,
if it has-
why wouldn't that point be mute if we're not leasing it for commercial cranberry operations?
Well, it could be valuable to somebody else. When the Cranberry Marketing Committee puts out an inventory for the whole marketing of the cranberry crop going forward for the year, it keeps it so there's a balance on the acreage, so that somebody, if they only have 5 acres and they only have a quota of 500 barrels, and for some reason they raised 1,000 barrels, this is where the orders come in, and they can delegate those numbers to other growers.
So if that has some capital value, that
Worth
capital value should be on the town's books somewhere, and
Worth
it,
looking into, that's for sure.
I mean,
Yeah. And Main Street bog also has that too.
something to keep in mind as well.
There's a lot to this cranberry stuff.
Yeah, there is.
Okay, thank you, Alan. So,
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think actually, I'd like to say now that we have more stuff to go on the agenda aside from this. And I suggest we finish this section 5, and
Yes.
there isn't much more here.
Yep,
And next time, we can take up with section 6.
yes.
Can I bring up something I was thinking about here, after looking at this
That's
aerial
my thought.
photograph? I'm wondering whether or not we need to contact the Wampanoag tribe and have them come down and see if this is an indigenous area, because I remember when I was a kid, there used to be about a 3/4 acre field right there in between where it says current parking and proposed parking. And a fellow in West Harwich by the name of Eric Farning used to dig arrowheads there, and he found hundreds of them in that field. It looked like a bunch of, things, foxholes. And I'm wondering whether or not they need to come down and survey that and see if it's some sort of site that the Wampanoag Indians used at one time.
There could be something to that, because when I was in high school, there was an archaeological site
Yeah,
out in
yeah.
that
Fred
area.
Dunford used his. He used
Yeah,
to do that.
that's correct.
Well, the whole area had occupancy.
Yeah, but that area was like concentrated right there
Interesting.
in that
I didn't
field.
know that.
There's no longer a field now, but it was.
We can, this is just a talking point suggestion. If we're contemplating moving something,
Right.
moving a parking lot, then
Right. So have
certainly
them
we
survey
can
and check
look
it.
at it,
Yeah.
yeah. Before we do, that's a good point,
We make changes.
so.
Okay, where are we here?
All right.
This one. I think the next points here is a comment from Brad, under the invasive species, item B under this,
Where are we?
page 16 on what I have, the first comment at the top of the page. Invasive species, and Brad is saying, I recommend fully revising all sections on invasive plant management. I could take a shot at this, but expect Amy and Melissa are best versed at the present BMPs. So,
We can take a stab at it.
Yeah, to me, it's, 10-year outdated information. It could be updated, and Amy can do that very well, I think.
Just time, just time.
so you have to prioritize. You've got a bunch of action items coming out of this, right?
Yep, it's gonna take a little, but we'll piece by piece, we'll go through it. But yes, we'll prioritize too. I mean, I think I'm gonna focus on the action items,
Right.
so we can start getting stuff done, and then we'll work on I can gradually work on language updates, but I wanna get some action done. Okay.
Okay, so the next, I had a thing that isn't in your copies under C, it's another grammar thing. Recommendations from the 2012 plan included changes to the parking area at the Herring, what just happened? Yeah, brother, wait a minute, sorry.
No, I have it. I have your changes.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
No, you don't. I don't think so.
Well, I have
Probably not the
something
one. This is in the middle of some changes from Brad, just at the beginning of item C.
Mm-hmm.
Just the word included there should be including fencing and replanting the buffer zones.
Okay.
And then Brad had a comment at the end, I guess, about this paragraph.
Yeah, the first plan had quite a bit on making some of these sites ADA compliance. And so there's quite a bit of discussion that follows there on that. For me, that Fishway location, I don't know if it's compatible to me with some of the things that they're implying might be done. It's just too much structure, too much alteration to a site in the buffer zone. So I just made the point that I think it needs discussion. If we keep some of this, like an ADA compliant pier and viewing platform, I just don't know if you have space. So I think we certainly have to consider that to be in the plan as well as we would a future NOI. There'd be an NOI that would require it for that. So folks should look at that and think about how they feel, because BSC Group kind of implied back then that this was something that might happen.
Yeah.
Think about what the space would occupy if you were to get it compliant.
Which space are we talking about here?
So it's under C, public use elements, goals, and environmental impacts. Third paragraph, Americans with Disability Act compliance can be gained near the fish ladder if everything was redesigned.
Oh, so we're
Pervious
talking about the
pavers.
fish ladder, yeah, okay.
I don't think I support that concept of pervious pavers.
I think, isn't he saying they might not be a good idea? Isn't that the point in there?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's worth discussing here and how people feel about that. You know, people should read those couple of paragraphs and think about it. Another thing too is, the Natural Resource Conservation Service is got that site on their list as a possible future rehab for the Fishway.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that, then you just redesign everything.
Yeah.
You just start over, and they would rebuild the berm.
Mm-hmm.
They would, and so maybe you change this language a little bit to say, let's wait on that concept to see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
That Fishway is in good shape. It doesn't need to be replaced right away, but I think that's a federal outfit that has the deep pockets to consider these things. And if you do redesign that, then yeah, you've got a side sluice, you got a big bulkhead, you've got a big earthen dam. I think you rebuild everything someday.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe you can fit in a little platform that, people can, disabilities can get out there. Right now, with the site the way it's set up, I don't know how you would do it in a way that makes sense. So
Okay.
folks, I just wanna call
Sure.
people's attention that they should look at that and think about that language and what they'd like to see for that location. Go down there, take a look, think about that. A lot of places are moving towards covering up fishways because people are concerned about liabilities. You'd hate to see that there.
Covering them up, really?
You're seeing a lot of that statewide grates, and so, I mean, people love looking at the fish
Of course
there.
they do.
Yeah,
Good
so
Lord.
I think, we should have just think about what we wanna see there in the future.
Okay.
That's my thought.
Okay.
So I think,
I think one thing that should really happen there is, you know, on the south side of the dike there should be a fence along there. 'Cause that's wide open, you walk right up to that edge of the concrete and flop right in the water. I mean, how much, it wouldn't take much to put a fence up along there.
Here's the thing though, people, a lot of fishing goes on there.
Yeah, you can fish over the fence, it
You
doesn't have
could
to
do
be a
something
6
low
foot
enough
high.
that a
you know.
kid can't just,
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be something, yeah.
I walk up there and look at it and go, ooh, myself.
all the illegal activities that happen there at night, it's amazing somebody
No,
hasn't,
that would
hasn't
never- that would never
fallen
happen
in
up
yet.
there, never
how do you know they haven't?
They could have.
It's
They
a
tell
site
the
that
tale.
people catch keeper striped bass and they love it. It's
Yeah.
like their only chance to get a keeper striped bass there, that spot. So it's really kind of an important little public access
Yeah.
for people that can't afford boats and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so I
Wow.
really wanna see that continue. But I do think that whole thing could be rebuilt.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's so much, so it's completely
Need to make it-
trampled
and-
down
Yeah.
too. I think there's a way you can maintain access and viewing and fishing, but just channelize and control that a little bit better, cause it's completely trodden, the whole
Yeah.
place.
Surprised nobody has complained about the not having the wheelchair access over that ramp, over that flume, you know?
Well, that's,
You know what I mean?
that's discussed here,
Yeah.
and I think with the present configuration, I don't know how you have the space to make it compliant.
You have to make
Not
long ramps
currently.
on either side and put
Yeah.
fences up on it, or rails, I guess is probably a better word.
Want me to take a stab at some language that recognizes the interest of NRCS to maybe revisit this rehabilitation? Is that-
If you know that it's a legit interest.
It's on their broader list of Cape Cod fish passage improvements,
Mm-hmm.
and I would have to check with them before I put their name in there.
Yeah, I
See-
wouldn't
Yeah, see if they're okay,
name in a document unless we knew it
but I,
was for certain.
I'm familiar with every fish run on the Cape, and I know that that site in a 10, 20-year window should be top of people's lists
Mm-hmm.
to
Yeah.
put money at.
Build an elevated, platform for observation platform, and,
Yeah, you could do that.
yeah, over in that far corner to the southeast, the southwest. Yeah, so people would go up there and look down in there.
Yeah, it's more about public access, I think.
Yeah.
Fish passage, they fish pass very well.
Yeah.
The entrance is getting scoured out because you got more of a tidal fluctuation there now, and so the entrance pool is scoured out and it undermines at low tide. So that's the only problem I see, other than it aging.
I was kind of talking to myself, and I was like, we still have executive session, folks.
Yeah, right, so I think we should move on at this point and maybe agree now when we're gonna come back, finish this run-through. And let's not talk yet about when all these changes, we're gonna review the results of everything we discussed tonight. But what's the deal with our next meeting, which is
We have a few
third-
hearings, but not a lot. We have,
Well, we spent about an hour tonight, and we've gotten 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through this on a first pass.
Yeah, but we haven't even touched the operation and maintenance steps, which are probably the most,
Right.
most discussed. So
So, do you think we can set aside an hour next time? Do you think,
we'll put it on, I'm trying.
yeah,
let's do that?
Cause then the meeting after that is like the 5th of July, and, you know, with 4th of July weekend, are people really gonna be wanting to do a lot of stuff that weekend? You know, before that meeting to prep, so FYI, the next meeting is a Thursday.
Yeah,
It's
right.
Thursday, the 22nd, because we have a Juneteenth holiday, so it bumps the regulatory boards back.
I see.
All right,
Okay, so, we'll do that, and now, so the next agenda items are minutes, right? Oh, no, possible changes to permit and community garden plot fees.
and permit and community garden plot fees. So starting with the garden plots, we have roughly 100 plots. They're approximately 20 by 20 feet. Plus we have 6 raised beds, which are small. for people who might have mobility issues and, you know, can't bend over and want a smaller spot at the community gardens. We currently only charge $40 for a big plot and $15 annually for a small plot. And what you get is, we till it for you, you get water, and we drop off compost. So the reason I'm thinking about raising the rates is because the garden, it's a nice thing to provide the community. We're not looking to make money off of it, but we don't want to lose money on it. And right now we're losing money on it. Now that money doesn't go into our coffers, we are in charge of renting out those lots, but that money goes into the general fund. But the water budget comes out of my budget for that. So that's another thing we can chat about too. But I've always tried to break even and find out about what, you know, again, so we don't make money, we don't lose money. And right now we are, because of the drought last year and just in general with the cost of things, cost to till, even though Skipper and, you know, gives us a good rate. The cost of water, even if we didn't have a drought. Looking at it well, but still. So I would like to raise those fees to $60 and then for the big plots, which I still think is a very good deal, and $25 for the raised beds. Or $60 and keep the other ones at $15 because they're tiny.
How many plots do you have, Amy, the large?
Roughly 100.
Large?
94.
Oh, so you're talking $2,000
No.
total.
No. Oh,
Right now, we make roughly it's in the 3,000 range.
well, 40
So
100
if it's-
plots at $40, that's $4,000.
Right.
So you go
Yeah,
to
but
six,
they're not, yeah, so we're up in the upper threes, because not every single
Yeah,
plot
okay.
gets rented.
What's the water bill run usually?
3,000 annually, last year it was like 4,500,
Really?
yeah.
Oh,
So we have stipulations too, I mean, you have to be there when you're watering. We actually have to get a hold of somebody, they put an irrigation system in, I gotta tell me, they can't, or at least if they have it, they have to be there when it's on, because people will turn it on, then go grocery shopping. We try to be water conscious down there, but
Do you happen to know if all the other departments in town pay a water bill as well?
I don't.
so.
Doesn't make any sense to
no,
me
no.
to transfer money back and forth at that level, especially in this case. I mean, this is simply trying to help a few people.
Yeah, crazy.
I would support approaching the water commissioners and see if there wasn't something that could be done about that.
How is it that we got stuck with that paying the water bill?
I
Is
don't
that something
know.
been going on
That's
for a long
before
time?
me, before me.
Yeah,
But
that
as
needs to be looked at, I
As
think.
far as you know, it's not like a statutory requirement, it's not something that's hardwired into the way the town is run.
No, I mean, it's our land, so that land is under the care and custody of the Conservation Commission.
But basic question here is, I guess my question is about the fact that the fees go into the general fund. So you're basically taking in whatever it is, call it $4,000,
Giving it to the town.
giving it to the town, and then the
And then
town
I
is
pay.
billing you.
Yes, the town's paying me,
So,
billing, yeah.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
but
We can rectify this.
do
Very
all
well done,
fees in
Mark.
town, do all fees in town for anything go directly into the general fund?
No,
but
they're,
the-
like, we have a
off the
wetlands account, there are separate accounts.
So is it the water department or the select board that would have the real call on this?
I think the water department, I think the Board of Water Commissioners.
Well, can we request you to write a letter to the water
Well,
department?
let me talk to Dan first and
Okay.
see what he would recommend for that.
Now,
But-
how is the money collected? Through you?
Huh?
So you know what's being collected.
Uh-huh.
So it'd just be a matter of the accounting for it that we're talking about.
Yeah, but, I mean, half the thing, it's sort of double jeopardy or something. Because maybe talking to Dan, you could get him to forgive the Conservation Department its water bill, but it still doesn't entirely make sense to me that the fees go into the general fund. And I doubt that's a Dan call.
That's not correct.
So,
I just meant
so
forgiving
the
the
question
water bill.
is, to the select board, why are we doing this? The Conservation Department has slim resources as it is. Why are we required to turn this over into the general fund? And I would be in favor of making a request directly to the board to change that arrangement. What do you think about that?
I'm ready to make a motion. I think we ask Amy to pursue those two items, and then we also accept her increase in fee proposal. I think
Well,
it's very
if we
reasonable.
can get some leeway on the water bills, then I don't want to increase the fees.
Well, how many plots are currently leased for this season?
There's 6 of them that are too wet, so 88 big ones and 6 raised beds.
So how many are still available?
Well, there's 6,
And are they
4
all-
or 6, but they're too wet.
Are they all spoken for, the 88?
Uh-huh.
Oh, they are?
Okay, so the
They're
fee
paid.
increase wouldn't be applicable until this coming season?
It would be next year.
Right.
Yeah, not this
Well,
year.
then I would say
They've already
take,
paid. They have to pay by December 1st if they want to keep their plot,
okay,
and new people can get them.
then I would say table the rate increase a little bit, and I would support working on the water department, seeing if there's something we can do.
Yeah.
And also, to John's point,
Yeah.
addressing the select board about the disbursement of the funds.
I put it in here because we're also talking about conservation fees, and the selectmen want, I've asked to be heard by the selectmen to talk about raising our permit fees soon, and they wanted, obviously to have you guys review it first. And so, I just lumped them all together.
Do they want the increase in the fees?
I was the one who brought it to the attention, and I think it has not been, like, I can segue into that if you'd like.
I think we
Stan?
support your recommendation, and
So you're
Pretty
gonna
simple.
approach
Well,
the select?
Water and selectmen about the
No, but
water
who are you gonna,
debacle.
water, so either, maybe to make the other way for them is either give us the funds to offset the water bill, or move the water bill into the general funds where the
For
income's from.
somebody else, well, somebody else will have to pay it, so, yeah, it's another department. Who would be responsible for paying the water bill if it wasn't us, So,
Or the water department could just waive them?
well, that's the ideal hope.
Yeah.
who pays for the water that gets used in this building? Does administration have a?
I don't know the answer.
No, but
Budget
I think
item?
that's what we're saying, where, move
Yeah.
the water, either move the funds
Right,
or move the bill.
I understand, yep.
in conversation, if there's ever an opportunity to address the Park and Rec Commission about whether they have to pay a water bill, because certainly with all the athletic fields and so forth in
Really?
town, there's a big water usage. I know the
Sure.
Golf Commission's got their own system, and they've got their own pond, so I'm sure that's not a particular issue. But I can well imagine they have fire protection and domestic water up at the clubhouse and the restaurant and so forth. Where does the responsibility lie, and it just doesn't make sense to.
I went by the Little League field the other morning, I think it was Sunday morning, and the irrigation system was on it. Big puddles out there all over the infield. Somebody's paying for that.
Right.
We also pay the water bill for the spigot that's at Thompson's Field that gives the dogs water.
A lot of the athletic fields are on wells.
Even the Little League field on Oak Street?
I don't know about the Little League field, but a lot of the athletic fields are on wells because they didn't want to pay the town bill.
Oh, Yeah, that's interesting.
All right,
Well,
well,
that was, so I was gonna pursue a CPC application for getting a well down at the gardens too.
Yeah.
So that's a big well, though, if you have to have a well that will supply, you know,
Pretty much constant pressure.
constant
I-
pressure for a lot, you know, 88, I mean, hopefully 88 people aren't trying to water their plots
No.
at the same time, but some significant chunk,
I
They'll
put out a
be-
request to 3 companies,
yeah?
and I got response from one. And they guided me as to what type of system we would need, and essentially they're assuming, like if a third, and this never happens, like if a third of the spigots were all in use at the same time or something like that.
Yeah,
That's what they wanted to base it on.
and how expensive
Pressure.
is
I
that?
don't remember.
But either way, I mean, you need money to pay for that, and that's, either way,
Yeah, it's not like
It
the
would be
water's
good
free
to-
after.
right, and you have to pay for maintenance.
Yeah.
You don't just sink
Right.
the well and you're
Right,
done.
you just don't sink a well in.
Um,
Well, maintenance, I mean, we have, right now, the water system is, down there is maintained by the maintenance department of the town.
But if you have a well and a well pump, all that stuff has to
It's
be.
a little different. Yeah, anyway,
So, there's 2 issues here, right? Still trying to straighten this out, because you're talking about the community gardens, and we sort of were converging there. Let's just settle that issue and then move on to the other conservation fees, right? Because I think we were getting those a little confused.
What are you supposed to be doing, Nick?
There's more. Owns a wife.
so I'm gonna talk to Dan and see if he thinks the water commissioners would give us any relief. And then, depending on that, talk to the administration about if we do have to pay the bill, would it makes more sense to move it to a different
So
department?
it matches.
Right, right.
Good accounting policy.
Do you need a motion or vote on that, or is that something you can
No, I
just
can,
assume? Okay.
no.
So we're dropping the direct request of the selectmen to have the fees go directly.
Let me talk to administration first,
Okay, all right.
and see what they would recommend.
And you will put this issue back on the agenda for our next meeting, so we can follow up on it.
We will do that. But I do
So-
wanna talk about the other fees real quick
Yeah,
if we can.
Yeah, let's,
So, we operate, my budget is small partially, well, one of the reasons my budget is small is because I don't believe in, like, asking and charging more money than what's absolutely necessary to operate. So we have a lean budget, but I also do believe that, for permitting in particular, it takes us time to process things, to review things, to do the labor around that, and that has a value to it. And I feel like we're undervalued, our fees are undervalued right now in a lot of ways. I don't think, so again, I was hoping you'd see these as modest increases. For an admin review, instead of 50, going up to 75 on average, it takes probably 2 hours to do each one of those between, you talk to people, you have to go out to site visits, you have to do the permit, you have to get everything out. It takes about 2 hours. So, right now it's at $50, I'm proposing 75. RDAs, honestly, if on our end, it's not much more review than an admin review, but we're at 85, I'm proposing 100. We haven't increased fees since I've been here, and that's been 12 years now. NOI, our current fee under the bylaw fee, because they pay a state fee, but our current bylaw fee, which this goes to the wetlands account, is $135. This is where I'm not quite sure I'm ready to say definitely I would propose $175, because I'm looking at other towns, and Leisha pulled together what other towns do for fees, and we can email this to you. And similar, just when people apply for a notice of intent, there's 5 or 6 different categories. Single family, work on a single family house is category 1, the fee is such and such. But then when you get into like subdivisions or docks and piers and things like that, you're a different category and your cost is different. So, and it incrementally goes up depending on the complexity of the work and the amount of review that's likely going to be, time that's going to be required to review it. So a lot of towns similarly do their local fees in that fashion of categories.
Wait a minute, what you were just describing is the state's fee structure?
The state's fee structure for a notice of intent is broken into several categories. And we get a portion of that goes to the general fund. But then we have a bylaw, a fee under the bylaw, which is common in all the towns, that there's a bylaw fee as well. Right now, we have a blanket fee, no matter if you're doing an addition, a dock, a major seawall, a commercial property, $135, which makes it really easy for us to input those fees and get it, but it's like, how do you equate somebody putting a small addition on their home that you might have to do an NOI for, and somebody building, a commercial structure or subdivision or something like that? There seems to be
What's the range of time typically that would take?
From 100 to, and I don't suggest going up this high, but there was one that was like 1,500.
Not asking, those are the state fees.
No. Well, the state fees, yes, so.
I was asking you about the time you have to spend
Oh.
on that range of kinds of projects, from a simple, somebody wanting to
It's getting less
bump out
because a
their
lot of
family room and,
filing is electronic, which saves us starting to save us some time. Be anywhere between 2 hours, 10 hours per project roughly. So, and that's, we don't have to come to an answer on this tonight, but there's some discrepancy, like why is a homeowner who's doing a garage being charged the same amount under the bylaw as somebody who's, maybe has a 6-bay commercial operation going in, I don't know.
I just want to say, I think, to me, this is pretty simple. We haven't had increases in at least 14 years. I think we accept Amy's analysis and her recommendations and just approve this tonight. I don't think we have to make this a big deal.
Well, the NOI, my recommendation for the NOI that I have on your site summaries is not kind of where I'm going at this point.
See, 175 to me is, I haven't seen your list, but I've dealt with a lot of other conservation commissions. I know 135 is low.
Yes.
And so I don't have a problem, unless you want to wait.
Doing a blanket, doing a flat fee makes it really easy for us, accounting-wise. But we haven't had anybody say anything bad about it. But yeah, do we care about, some projects are tiny and some projects are much bigger, and they're paying the same amount.
Do you know what the total was collected in fees last year?
We average between 8,000 and 12,000. It's not a lot compared to like the building department.
So you're looking for a 50% increase, basically?
Most of our fees actually come in, we do a lot of admin reviews. We will do over 100 admin reviews a year. But we only do we do far fewer NOIs.
Mhm.
We average in the 20s or 30s for NOIs.
The only number here I see I feel is a little steep is the reissuance of a document. which is currently free, and you're looking for 25.
Looking for 25 because it also, it requires getting attested usually downstairs and a few other, it's not just a simple print. Usually requires new signatures, so that's something, when I have
Oh,
you guys
right.
come in and sign something,
Yeah.
because we didn't have it here, it's usually because it needs they lost it and they need a new signature document.
Okay.
So it's a little, it's
Yeah.
more than just like
Yeah, all
spitting
right.
it out a printer. You can change that, but
It
that's
ma-
standard.
It made sense, but I didn't realize that.
And then it usually has to get
Mr.
attested
Chairman?
downstairs.
I would suggest that we sort of go along with Brad's recommendation. I think that these increases are certainly very reasonable, but that also, Amy, if you want to look into the progressive, fee structure, I think that would be a good idea, and you could come back to us at a later date if you develop a recommendation. But I think for right now, let's just approve these
All right.
so that you can.
Well, let me go to the
get
Board of
increase.
Selectmen, or go to the Board of Selectmen and get their feel for it and their
Okay.
recommendations too.
Fine,
Because they have to approve fee changes,
yeah.
so
When
Do
will
you
this take
need a-
effect?
we can make it whenever. We can
Amy, do
do
you need a
January
motion?
next year.
Do you need a
Wait.
motion from us to go?
Wait a minute. Just have a question. These are under the bylaw, but this does not entail a bylaw change? The bylaw says there will be fees,
Yep.
and the fees are in the regulations?
The fees, I don't believe are actually, the fees are not in the bylaw. I mean, it alludes to fees.
Right.
I can't remember if the fees are in the regs. I don't know if I have a copy of the regs with me. I do, maybe. Let's think.
I have
Yes, I
one
do.
other question.
Keep my copy here.
You've been thinking about graduated fees on the NOI. Can you tell us what, like, the range is you're thinking about, or some notion of where you're going with this?
Between 1 and 500.
I see.
Not like what one town was 100 on the low and like 1,500 on the high end, and I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We don't want to overcharge people.
So you're wondering whether we need a motion now or wait until we come back, is that it, Jim?
No, whether we need a motion for Amy to basically approve these increases, and direct Amy to go to the Board of Selectmen.
Please.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Then I'll make a motion that we approve the Conservation Commission fees as discussed this evening and direct Amy to go to the Board of Selectmen with that recommendation.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none? All those in favor?
Aye.
None opposed?
All right, we have one set of minutes, regular minutes.
Oh, yeah, what about Alan? Alan, are you there?
Aye, yeah, aye.
Okay, 7-0.
All right, a set of minutes,
Thank
and
you.
then we'll do a quick executive session.
So just the executive, yeah, I had no comments on that.
No, we're not doing executive minutes yet. We're doing the May 10th meeting that
Oh,
was in your Dropbox.
I have no comments on the May 10th. You guys want a few minutes? You good?
Yep.
Everybody good?
Yep.
Okay, well then I'm gonna make a motion to approve
And I'll second.
the minutes for May 10th, 2023. Okay, further comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Alan. All right, now we're ready.
To exit regular session, not to return, and to enter into executive session.
So do we have such a motion?
Yes. I'll move that we enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing ongoing litigation, and that following the conclusion of that discussion, that we not return to open session.
Need a second?
Second.
And a roll call.
So
Do we have to close for?
do we have to have a motion to exit normal session or just going into executive session? Okay, so,
He has covered it.
okay, we'll do a roll call, starting with Mark.
I'm Mark Coleman.
I stand Pastuzek.
I, John Ketchum.
Hi, Jim Atkinson.
Hi, Brad Chase.
Hi, Wayne Colton.
I think Alan unfortunately
Are
is
you
gonna
with us,
get,
Alan?
I think he's gonna get booed.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave. I'm gonna leave because you guys shut off the camera. So have a good night.
Good night.
Okay, good
Good
night.
night, Alan.
Okay.
Yep, just let us know when we're ready.
Why don't we take a 2 or 3 minute
Okay,
break?
we have a
Okay.
5-minute break.
5.
Good idea.
No, absolutely not.
If anybody who's staying here wants to sign
I thought this was the
something,
shortest agenda ever.
Yeah, and it's the longest meeting we've
can.
had probably all year.
if you're interested in our
My
core
stomach's
cases,
gotten
I'm gonna
used
be
to having dinners
fast.
before.
Oh, sorry,
I'm
well,
gonna try to be fast.
Effectively ended the meeting.
Yes, we're done, and I'll lock up and shut lights off and all that.
yeah, I mean, I don't know,
I like the progress we made on the management plan, it was good.
yeah.